This video has been funded in part by the Guild via Patreon. Check out the links in the description or at the end of this video for more details.
Once I finish a Dynasty Warriors game, I start to anticipate the next. I am eagerly waiting for Dynasty Warriors 9. Now, I know I went in depth on the differences between the Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors series, but I didn't get a chance to talk about each entry into the main series. So I decided that I would take time and touch on each Dynasty Warriors release, including each expansion. PBG has Zelda month, Pro Jared has D in December, so why can't I have my Koei month? Koei Tecmo is such a huge part of my collection, and as a gamer, they are my favorite developer. So that's why I declare this Musou May. Finally, a month dedicated to everything Dynasty Warriors and Koei Tecmo. I'm starting off this annual event with Warriors Week. So every day this week, starting today, you'll have a brand new video reviewing each of the Dynasty Warriors games up to Dynasty Warriors 8. I will be skipping the first Dynasty Warriors game for the original PlayStation as it's not technically a main series entry. It's kinda complicated. In Japan, this game was simply called Sangoku Musou. This is a one-on-one weapon-based fighting game. When the game continued to the PlayStation 2, the title became Shin Sangoku Musou. This became its own series, separate from the original. This is where the army-sized hack-and-slash gameplay came in, and what I feel is the real beginning of Dynasty Warriors. That's why I've decided to start right here with the first Pro! This is totally Dynasty Warriors. In and out, the combat mechanics are solid. Cutting through waves of enemies is extremely satisfying. Unlike modern Warriors games, these classic titles make you want to clear the map of enemy soldiers. Every attack has weight to it. It feels like characters with heavy weapons attack the way that they should, as well as lighter and faster weapons have weightlessness to them. The whole game gives an arcadey feel to it. You actually feel the need to get the bigger KO count. It feels like modern warrior games give the focus on the officers and generals, giving you less concern with the foot soldiers. This gives the game a more complete feeling of realism. The basic controls make it easier to jump in and play. Even if you've never played a Dynasty Warriors game before, just get a quick rundown of square is your regular attack, triangle ends your combo, circle is your special meter, and L1 is your block. And even what I said has essentially become the standard for action games, especially in the hack and slash and beat 'em up genres. Con! Though the on-foot combat is excellent and set the groundwork for the games to come, the horse and bow combat seems to have been added in last minute. The horse combat is a joke. Running around is too sensitive. You can hold the block button to strafe an attack, but your attacks are weak and you're too easily knocked off. If I ever start a battle mounted, the first thing I do is hit X to get off the horse. Then I hit L2 to turn on the enemy health bars. Then I start playing. Oh yeah, did I mention that you needed to hit a button at the beginning of each stage to turn your enemy health bars on? There's no setting for that. The bow combat is even worse. You can't turn a full 360 degrees to aim around you. Auto-aim is annoying when you're trying to aim at someone else. Similar to the horse, you can hold the block button to move around, but this isn't first-person shooter. There was a Samurai Warriors game for that. I only ever use this for the sake of the video. I would never fight on a horse or use bows in my playthrough of the games. Running up to archers and attacking them is much more effective than aiming, waiting, and firing. Also, Lubu sucks. He looks like his halberd's possessed and he won't let go of it. Pro! For a game that came out so early in the PS2's life, this game looks pretty damn good. The textures and complicated character designs are a sight to behold and were probably a marvel back in the day. Also, look at how many people are on the screen. Look at that character detail. There's just a hint of slowdown, which is something modern Warriors games are kind of known for. I had to play the game for days just to have it slow down on me. Even the cutscenes aren't too bad for the time. All things considered, this gets an A+ for presentation. I mean, this was a launch title for the PS2. God damn, that's impressive. The fact that the large battlefields are rendered this well, with AI patterns being implemented so that your allies might kill another officer or die on the other side of the map, that's just extraordinary. These maps are huge for the time and are a blast to walk through. Though, I mostly played the Yellow Turban stage because most of my characters are lower leveled, and this game is hard as balls! Con! One thing that I love about Dynasty Warriors games is playing them with my friends. Sadly, Dynasty Warriors 2 did not have that feature. Maybe the technology wasn't capable of supporting two players at the same time. Maybe Koei wanted to rush this out. There are so many things that could have happened. But the lack of a multiplayer feature is such a burn when you come back to play this game after years of having it. Playing with a friend would have been nice. I would have enjoyed forcing a friend to sit down and record some gameplay with me. But no, Koei didn't have that feature in this game, making it the only main series Dynasty Warriors game with absolutely no multiplayer feature whatsoever. Pro! There are a lot of characters to play as. They may share movesets with each other, but at least they look individual. Characters that were in the PS1 fighting game have their own moveset and even keep their weapons from that game too. With that said, there are lots of reasons to play through each character's story. Even after that, when you unlock the other characters like Lubu and Dao Chan, they are so much fun to take into free mode and either fight on their side of the battlefields or against them. Even taking different characters into stages they were never in to begin with is fun. If this was the only game you had, you could have lots of replayability. Con! I'm gonna reiterate that last sentence with a different inflection. If this was the only game you had, you could have lots of replayability. That would be the only time you feel compelled to fully complete this game. There's no reward. All there is to do after you unlock all the characters, max out everyone's stats. And trust me, that's no fun. On my first file of this game, I maxed out maybe 3 characters and then gave up. There wasn't anything rewarding about it with the exception of bragging rights. And who's gonna care if you maxed out every character's stats in Dynasty Warriors 2? I mean, good on you if you did, but why? What's the point? It's not like you can unlock secret characters, weapons, costumes. There isn't really much point in playing this game past finishing every character's story mode. You know, with the exception of writing a review for an entire week of Dynasty Warriors videos. I imagine this game would have been more fun to me at its initial release back in the year of 2000. If this was the first Dynasty Warriors game I ever played, I could see me enjoying every part of it. But with all this game offers and all that I know of the changes in the next entry, I can't help but feel the need for more. And I don't mean of this game. It's fun, don't get me wrong. The arcadey hack and slash gameplay is incredibly enjoyable for maybe one stage at a time. And for a launch title, Dynasty Warriors 2 showed great graphical prowess even with so many characters on screen at one moment. That being said, the lack of any multiplayer and replayability, along with the additional things to unlock characters, makes this a lackluster entry when you consider all the series has coming for it. When you look at this entry as a first ever in the series and a launch title to boot, I could give this a solid 6. But when I look into the future, hell, the very next entry, I know that Koei can do much more. That's why Dynasty Warriors 2 gets a 4 out of 10. Having different weapons or costumes to unlock for each character would have been a big help for this game. Even to have different stages for each character. I just want more, but that's only because I'm used to what this series has to offer. The game has potential, but just misses the mark of its successors. Trust me, it only gets better from here. This was the beginning of my love for Dynasty Warriors. I actually disliked the series at first, finding that it was bland and difficult to progress. I was young, what can I say? But when a friend and I were looking through my games to play something together, we noticed this was 2-player, so we decided to give it a try. Since that day, I've devoted so much of my free time to enjoy this ever-growing series, watching as it only gets better and better. Looking back on this series, it has some flaws that grow ever more apparent when you play the newer games. So how is Dynasty Warriors 3 now? Well, we're gonna take a look at it along with the Extreme Legends expansion with the first Pro! Right out the gates, you can tell this game looks better than the previous entry. The textures are more crisp, the movements are more fluid. I swear I can see more characters on screen than the last game. Everyone looks more individual in this game. The enemy officers have a little bit more variety than before. The weapons also look better. No longer do characters run around with generic looking swords and spears. Yeah, you start off with those weapons, but they get bigger and better. Each character model has more polygons and the textures have seen a great deal of improvement. Unlike Dynasty Warriors 2, I can still pick this game up and not feel dated by the graphics. All in all, they do look a bit old-fashioned, but this is part of their charm. Trust me, watch the Dynasty Warriors 2 review and then come right back to this video and you'll notice a difference. The world in this game feels a little bit more real, though it's definitely far from the graphics of the latest entries. God! Oh god, the voice acting. It's so laughable. It's almost so bad it's good kind of thing. But the biggest thing is that it doesn't help this game's case. A lot of people make fun of the voice acting and the script, and with good reason. The script is childish and suffers from a lack of point. The voice acting is either called in, overacted, or both. Enunciation is completely off, and delivery, well, there's barely any of that. Characters who should be intimidating are anything but. Lubu sounds like a nasally dad trying too hard to sound cool, and they don't pronounce Cao Cao's name correctly. Say Cao Cao. Characters don't have a solid, well, character. All except Wei Yan and Zhang He. They're the only characters that sound like their actors were kinda trying, even though they may have been trying a bit too hard. There are 2 of the few characters who actually feel real-ish. Pro! So much was added in this entry that it's going to take me a while to touch on everything, but I'm gonna do my best. First of all, you can select different weapons. These weapons get bigger and stronger. You start off with a generic looking weapon. This weapon has the same 4 attack combo that was used in Dynasty Warriors 2. The second weapon is slightly bigger and now has a 5-hit combo. The third weapon is individual to the character and has 6 hits. There is also a 4th weapon that you can unlock by playing through a specific stage with a specific character doing a specific thing on the hardest difficulty. Yeah, I don't have any of those. Dynasty Warriors 3 was also the first to introduce the Extreme Legends expansion. With it came a 5th weapon that was stronger than any of the other weapons. Also, you have to play a specific stage with a specific character doing a specific thing on an even harder difficulty. Yeah, I don't have any of those either. Also, each character gets a more individual story, which is incredibly welcome after Dynasty Warriors 2 having the same stages for each character for their respective dynasty. With the Extreme Legends expansion, you also get to play as the other faction characters. This includes Lu Bu, Diao Chan, Yuan Xiao, Dong Zhuo, and the newly added Meng Hua and Zhu Rong. Also, when you complete a character's story in the expansion, you get an alternative color palette for the costume of that character. These costumes add a bit more to the game and you have to grind out for those bloody weapons. Items have also been added to increase your stats. Some can be extremely useful though when you're playing as a weaker character, or adding some luck to get better equipment. Maybe you want to start off the stage with red hair, but for the most part, items are pretty useful. Also, if you want, you can customize your bodyguards with the Extreme Legends expansion. This isn't like custom characters, but at the time this was all we had. You can add your friends, your idols, whatever you want. I used to add names of characters from other games. This time I added my YouTube friends and other YouTubers who are in the Koei Tecmo community. Oh yeah, and if you get knocked down, you can hit guard to jump back up. It's now become a muscle reflex, and sadly it didn't work in Dynasty Warriors 2. Con! There were a few things that were not improved on. In fact, some of the things stayed the same way as they were in Dynasty Warriors 2. Horses are still only useful for traversing the large maps, and ranged combat is still a joke. You still have no control over the camera, making combat awkward and clunky sometimes. You have to hit guard to reset the camera behind your character. This can only be done if you're not in the middle of an action, so you can't move the camera behind your character when you're in the middle of an attack, that being the most important moment you'd need to move the camera. Also, it sometimes seems like you can only attack in a straight line, forcing you to plan out your attacks a little bit more. Though this might sound like the game is trying to add a little bit of strategy to its combat, you're sadly mistaken. Sometimes you kill who's in front of you and a group of enemies show up right behind you, and you either have to keep attacking who's in front of you or stop your combo to aim at those behind you. Also, archers can still suck a fat dick. Damn it, pro. Probably the biggest thing for me, and one of the reasons why I love this series most of all, is the 2-player co-op. It was introduced in this entry, and it's what got me to play this. I already told this story at the beginning of the video, but I'll expand it out. When I was a wee young lad, something like 13, I traded some games into a local pawn shop. I usually brought in games that I stopped playing or beat, and was able to trade them in for other games and get good deals. So as I was deciding which games to get, Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends ended up being one of them. At the time, I judged books by their covers, and this was no exception. I expected an epic adventure, something along the lines of Dark Cloud. When I put the game into my PS2, I was disappointed. It wasn't what I expected. I didn't get an epic journey. It was a single map with loads of enemies. To me, at the time, it was a mess. Months would pass until the fateful day. My friend was over and we decided which game to play. It wasn't quite what it's like now, but I still had a few games at the time. We saw this game was 2-player, and even though I remembered my disappointment, we threw the disc into the PS2 and started playing. Next thing we knew, we were having fun, we were enjoying it, we were telling each other, yo, go left, I'll take the guy at the main camp. It not only strengthened our friendship, but also my newfound love for this game. I would even get my father to play with me, and he enjoyed the game. And to this day, my very first suggestion when I have friends over is Dynasty Warriors. Or, well, whatever Warriors game I'm playing at the time. I mean, doesn't have to be Dynasty Warriors specifically. It could be Samurai Warriors, One Piece, maybe Berserk, Fist of the North Star, Gundam, Arslan, Hyrule Warriors. God! Dynasty Warriors 3 also didn't improve on the difficulty. It's easier if you want to play through the story. You deal more damage and you take a little less. However, trying to unlock the 4th and 5th weapons are the most destructive thing to my sanity that I've ever experienced. I always attempt to complete Dynasty Warriors games. I'm still playing some of them now to get closer to that completion. I've only actually been able to do that with a select few titles. Most of them have a lot of grinding and difficult challenges to complete in order to achieve these goals, and this one is no fucking exception. The fact that your allies are so useless when you take the difficulty anywhere above easy means trying to get the 4th and 5th weapons are an out-of-reach dream that's so close yet so far away. You can try, but you will not come out unscathed. Your commander practically kills himself before the enemy can get to him, or the person you specifically need to kill gets killed by somebody else. Then there's those times where you have to do something within like 5 seconds of the start of battle and you can't do it because you're a fucking human with flaws and shit. And the grinding. Oh, the grinding! No one should be forced to grind this much. It's absolutely atrocious just to think about it. How many times do I have to go into a stage just to get the plus 10 health or Musou? Defense is the first thing you max out because all the gate captains drop plus 1. You can combo officers to make them drop bigger buffs, but to do that to every officer is so tedious. Fuck! I'm never gonna finish this game. All in all, the biggest thing this entry has going above and beyond its predecessor is replayability. I never felt compelled to continue through Dynasty Warriors 2. I just wanted to finish my script and be done with it. When I started up Dynasty Warriors 3, especially Extreme Legends, I knew I wanted to continue my save file and get further. This sadly wasn't my original save. I had all the characters' stories finished, and I even had a couple of their 4th level weapons. My favorite character, Xiahou had maxed out stats along with Lu Bu. I had sold my memory card along with my PS2 as a kid. What can I say? I was stupid. That being said, I really want to get my current save file back up to what it was before. That's more than I can say about Dynasty Warriors 2. I didn't want to continue with that game. It felt too much like a chore. I had already beat every character's story on my old memory card that I mentioned earlier. If I wasn't missing out on anything before, why would I do it all over again if I have so many other games that I'd rather play? As soon as I loaded up this game, I knew I actually wanted to advance my save file. I'd try to finish character stories that I didn't finish before, get Xiahou closer to his maxed out stats, and possibly get his 4th weapon. None of that actually happened, but hey, I'm a busy man. Dynasty Warriors 3, along with Extreme Legends, added so much to the series, and it's what makes me say that Dynasty Warriors is the king of 3D hack-and-slash games. Since this game, most sequels have been compared to it, and with good reason. If at all possible, I try to get people to try this entry before writing off the entire franchise for good. Even with the cons that I mentioned, I give the entire package of Dynasty Warriors 3 8 out of 10. The only thing that would make this game better is a more evened out difficulty to make completing it more achievable, redoing the voice acting to better suit the game, solidifying the horse combat as something the player wants to use, and get rid of the range combat completely. I hope you give this game a try, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you tomorrow with the next game. I consider Dynasty Warriors 2 through 5 the classic era of the series. Dynasty Warriors 4 remains on top as my personal favorite classic entry in the series. After playing the hell out of Dynasty Warriors 3, I was hyped so hard for this game. I even played the demo that I had received in a PlayStation magazine months before its retail release. This was also the first game to receive an Empires expansion, taking the game in a more tactical route, making the player use more strategy. This was also the first game to allow you to play as your own custom character. But as time passed and newer games were released, did this game lose its charm? Let's jump in and find out with the first Pro. There are several minor improvements from the previous game that have to make it as its own Pro. First of all, the graphics have had an amazing overhaul. The last two games had a more cartoonish style to them, and this entry looks more realistic. The voice acting also portrays this. You can tell that there was a definite increase in quality. Every voice has been recast, and for the better. You can tell these actors take their roles more seriously. These are welcome changes that help with the immersion, because I doubt anyone felt more into a game after a line like this was spoken.
Feel the power of my magic!
Duels are now something, and though rare, add a bit more depth to the combat. Every character's moveset has been tweaked. Alternate costumes make a return, this time in the vanilla game, and more costumes are to be had. They are no longer dependent on whether you've beaten the story, but on each character's rank. First, you'll unlock an alternate color palette. Next, you'll unlock an altered version of the original outfit. This could have been a concept version or something. Either way, the slightly altered costumes are really cool. And last but not least, you unlock the character's Dynasty Warriors 3 costume. I used to play these costumes a lot when I was younger. Nostalgia is strong with this one. By the way, the music? God, the music! Using hard rock and metal sounds along with traditional Chinese instruments gives this game even more immersion. The soundtrack is my favorite to all Dynasty Warriors games ever. There aren't many entries that I would say I go out of my way to listen to. Dynasty Warriors 4 is the best soundtrack. If I could review the soundtrack alone, it'd be 10 out of 10. No questions. Con! Some of the minor tweaks and changes that were made weren't necessarily the best decisions. Some of the changes at the time of release seemed minuscule and didn't matter, but now I know they're just not needed. First of all, the weapons. You no longer pick up different weapons like in Dynasty Warriors 3. You have a weapon level. This only increases when you defeat officers who give you weapon experience. I didn't like this when it was first released, but I got used to it, and I still don't really like it. I accept that it's the game's way of giving you the character's weapons, but I like going back and sometimes using the first weapon and running into a level. Also, I mentioned earlier that this is the first game that you can create your own character in. You don't really get much to customize your character with. There are obviously 2 genders, 3 different of each headgear, body armor, and leg armor. You can pick any color of any faction in the game, and you can only pick between sword, spear, pike, greatsword if you're a dude, and rapier if you're a dudette. This isn't enough to feel fully customizable and leaves you wanting much more. In Empires, you get a bit more selection and you can use anyone's weapons, but it's still not the same as most other custom character creators from games around the same time. There was also a PSP game that was released with similar looking character designs. Because of this, I honestly thought it was a port of Dynasty Warriors 4. Alas, it sucked. You couldn't keep your weapon levels between stages, and you go back and forth between very small stages. It is very similar to the Game Boy Advance game that was released during Dynasty Warriors 4's relevance, and I didn't really like it that much either. Lastly, bows are still useless. Horse combat, though slightly more refined, is also useless. You can also click R3 to do a taunt that'll stun enemies and leave them open for an attack. Oh, did that sound like a pro to you? Well, it's not, because your taunt animation lasts just as long as their stun animation, rendering it, you guessed it, useless. Pro! Extreme Mode, added thanks to the Extreme Legends expansion pack, allows you to play through smaller stages, hire allies and troops, and travel all over the place. The biggest challenge here is that you don't recover health between stages. You have to buy meat buns to regain your health. You can also buy troops, officers, and stat upgrades. You are also given smaller missions every now and then during the stages that will grant you bonuses if you can complete them. The mode is a lot of fun to see how far you can get. Sadly, it's not 2-player, but it doesn't really need to be. It's almost a survival mode in the game to see how long you can last. I remember playing this a lot when I first got the Extreme Legends expansion. To make it 2-player, my friends and I would take turns through the stages, and whoever's turn it was, they got to decide what to buy before the stage. It was a lot of fun. Even while I write this script, all I can think is how great it would be to have something like this added into the newer Warriors titles. A similar feeling mode was given to us in Berserk and the Band of the Hawk in the form of the Eternal Eclipse. It's not quite the same, but it's close enough in my opinion. If this mode makes a comeback, I'd be very happy. With the exception of the aforementioned Extreme mode, the Extreme Legends expansion doesn't really expand on what we already have with the vanilla game. Yes, you get the 5th weapons, but the new Legend mode only allows you to play through one new stage per character. This is a glorified free mode. Also, I'd barely call them stages because they're more like a character-specific challenge. The previous expansion allowed you to play through new stages and gave us alternate costumes. I would have liked to see more costumes, and if they saved the other story modes for the expansion, this would have been more worth it. Hell, if they added stuff to the custom characters, I wouldn't be riffing on it as much. If you want to play Dynasty Warriors 4, unless you can find Extreme Legends for about $5 or something, I would not recommend it. If I were only to rate the Extreme Legends expansion, I'd only give this a 3 out of 10, as it doesn't have enough to keep me coming back to it. When recording, I'd be constantly reinstalling the original data, unlike Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends, where I could still enjoy the story mode and free mode with the Extreme Legends stages. Each dynasty now gets their own story, and you can choose from different characters within that faction. I much prefer this as it doesn't allow for characters to share the same stages throughout their stories. Now each dynasty starts with the same 2 chapters, but then progress differently depending on how you complete the stages. For example, if you kill Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang in the first 2 stages, they will not appear in the 3rd stage. However, you can either let them escape, or you can go straight to the 3rd stage if you want. It does make unlocking characters more difficult, but then it makes you want to replay the story again and again. There was one character who gave me a lot of grief to unlock. You have to have a side chapter appear and beat it, but it was difficult to have it appear in the first place. But that didn't deter me from replaying the story over and over until it happened. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that there's secret stages that appear when you beat previous stages in a certain way. Like if you allowed Deng Zhuo or Zhang Jiao to escape during their final stages of their chapters. They may reappear in a secret chapter. This story mode is much more intricate than before and beefs up replayability tenfold. You can also bring your custom characters into the story. During some cutscenes, whoever you're playing as will appear and maybe even have a line or two. These cutscenes can be triggered by every single character, including custom ones. That's awesome and makes it feel like you, the player, are making a difference on the battlefield. Where do I start? Dynasty Warriors 4 Empires does a lot wrong, and all the things that it does right do not make up for it. When it was announced, the entire community got excited. It was Dynasty Warriors but with a tactical edge. Though it added a bit of strategy to the mix, the overall execution of the game fell flat. Let's start with some of the better things that it did. It gave you more to work with for the custom characters, as I said earlier, but it only adds so much. You can now select between 3 different kinds of character types with each gender. Again, this leaves more to be desired for the custom characters. You can also play as the generic officers. This is fun for a little bit until the novelty wears off. I actually played a lot with the generic characters when this game first came out because that was the biggest thing to me. So many new characters to play as. You can also inspect the character models in the gallery. This is pretty cool if you didn't unlock the 4th and 5th weapons in the vanilla or Extreme Legends versions. You can also look at the generic officers and troops. And that's about it for good things. Now on to the bad things. First thing is the weapons and items. The levels restart every time you start a story. The only way to increase the levels is by taking over the proper areas and selecting to upgrade those weapons when they are available. Also, you need the correct amount of gold, and you don't get to choose which weapon or items get the level up. Your officers do. Also, you start from the Yellow Turban campaign when you start the story. It is really difficult to stick it out to the final stages like Wu Zhang or Yi Ling. You need to make sure the needed factions are still alive and that you continue to do what's right to meet the requirements. All in all, the Empire's game is a letdown. I really wanted to be able to carry over my weapons and items when I started to play a new game. As I gave Extreme Legends a rating, I'll rate Empires 5 out of 10. It's still enjoyable for what it is, but it leaves you wanting a hell of a lot more. Overall, I know my cons seem to have more weight than my pros, but Dynasty Warriors 4 remains my favorite of the classic games, which range between Dynasty Warriors 2 and 5. Dynasty Warriors 4, to me, has the most amount of replayability. When you combine the vanilla and the Extreme Legends, everything that the expansion has going wrong with it disappear. Though when you add the Empires, it still leaves you wanting a bit more. That being said, Dynasty Warriors 4 was the game I kept coming back to as a kid. I continued to play it even when Dynasty Warriors 5 was released. And even now, if ever a classic Dynasty Warriors gets an HD remastering, I would hope that it would be this one. Please, Koei, if you can hear me, at least release this as one of the PS2 on PS4 games. Add some trophies to it and I'll be the happiest warrior out there. So with everything being considered, I give Dynasty Warriors 4 along with the Extreme Legends and Empires releases an 8.5 out of 10. The Empires version brings down the rating a little bit on this one, but the core game is definitely the best of the classics. Give it a try and I'll see you tomorrow for the next entry. Dynasty Warriors 4 kept me devoted so much that I actually didn't look deeply into the next game in the series. Dynasty Warriors 5 would take a step back to some of the updates that Dynasty Warriors 3 had, including finding weapons rather than leveling them up. The 5th entry had a few new characters and went back to a character-specific story. As I've said before, I consider Dynasty Warriors 2 through 5 to be the classic series. So with this being the final entry before the next chapter of Dynasty Warriors games, did it hit the mark? I know the community loves this entry, but what do I think about it? Let's find out with the first Pro! Before I start talking about the vanilla game or even the Extreme Legends expansions, I want to say how much I love the Empire's entry for Dynasty Warriors 5. First of all, they went from this, which looked very close to the graphics of Dynasty Warriors 4, to this. It's an impressive difference. Nearly every complaint that I had about Dynasty Warriors 4 Empires have been addressed in this entry. Weapons are more easily upgraded, characters hold their levels in new games. There are now scenarios you can play through so you can be sure you're going to experience the important battles. You can now command your officers with the D-pad. By pressing up, you'll command your forces to attack the enemy. The allied AI isn't overly good at this, but it will capture bases and defeat officers. You know, sooner or later. By pressing down, you'll command your army to go on the defensive. Officers will retreat to the closest allied base and defend them from oncoming enemies. By pressing the right, you'll give the AI freedom to act on its own. This is usually kind of meh. I only use this command if I'm playing as an overpowered character and can do everything myself. And lastly, you can press the left to command the officers to gather around you. This can be handy if you're surrounded by enemy officers, which can happen often if you press too deep into the enemy territory. You now have a set number of decisions you can make prior to the battle. Within that, you have 3 ways you can enact policies. You can allow officers to suggest things to you. This is useful as you can get 2 actions for the price of 1. Or you can delegate the decisions to one of your officers, and they'll use up all of your decisions for you. And finally, you can pick your own policies. This is the most welcome change to the entire game as it allows you to ensure you get what you want. God! As much as I love playing the Empire's entry on the 360, I still much prefer the vanilla versions of the Dynasty Warriors games. I find them to be more focused and I enjoy replaying them. That's why I'm incredibly disappointed that Dynasty Warriors 5 wasn't released on the 360. At least not in the West. Yes, that's right, Japan got a 360 exclusive for the Dynasty Warriors series. I don't even care that it's just the vanilla version with only some parts of the Extreme Legends editions. That's fine. I would have loved to play through this game on the 360. Imagine the looks of the Empire's game, but with the story and replayability of the vanilla game. They really wouldn't have had to do much to bring it over to the West. It's not like they would have had to translate it. They already did that with the PS2 release. They even did all the voice acting already. They would have just had to program the game for the different regions. Hell, I wouldn't have even cared if they just released it without the voice acting, even though they would have had the assets from the PS2 version. I just want to play it in HD. It was available to the Japanese market, so why not the Western? This would have been another pro if they had done the easy thing and released Dynasty Warriors 5 on the 360. Pro! Though I said in the last video that I much prefer the Dynasty-specific stories, this was much better executed than Dynasty Warriors 3. We're back to each character having their own story, but this time each character's story is much more individual. You feel like you're actually playing through their history, rather than the stages that were just given to them by the game designer. Each character gets more fleshed out this way, and it feels like the game is becoming more story-driven. This is exciting because you begin to feel more connected to the characters and what they're doing. Between each stage, you also get a bit of dialogue between the characters, which expands on the story even more. This is what I feel like Dynasty Warriors 3 should have done. Even when you get overlapping stages between characters, they feel different. The cutscenes in the story also help to drive home the characteristics of the various playable officers. I feel like their quirks and differences are better displayed in this game, and definitely give me much more to connect with. They've added a couple of what-if stages to some characters who would have had their stories halted due to their death. Though this is really cool, it does take away from the intricacy of Dynasty Warriors 4's story mode. All the little changes make the story feel more immersive. Even though I prefer the Dynasty-specific story of the previous title, I would still consider this a plus for this entry. You don't really have too many overlapping stages, and when you do, there's enough dialogue between the characters to make them feel like you're playing a new iteration of that stage. God! As with each installment before it, Dynasty Warriors 5 comes with a plethora of minor tweaks to the gameplay mechanics. Some of them are welcoming features like bringing back randomized weapons in the aforementioned story, others bring the game down a peg. Duels are no longer a thing. I really enjoyed them in Dynasty Warriors 4 as they give the characters more of a rivalry. Some movesets are slightly updated, and for the most part it's, well, okay. Like, why did it need to be changed? Like, Shahudun is made less fun. I loved the wind scar-ish thing he did as his final charge attack. Now it's just a swing and a flashy spinny swing thing. Bodyguards are no longer customizable. You get these randomized created characters that will randomly join you. Even though the bodyguards of the previous games were just generic troops and officers, I would have preferred this as I liked adding my friends in this way. Dynasty Warriors 5 also had a coinciding PSP game, similar to Dynasty Warriors 4. Its title, for some reason, was Dynasty Warriors Volume 2. Again, it's very similar to the first PSP game, and it's not a full port, which you know they could have done because they later released a great port of Warriors Orochi, which disappointed me when they didn't just do that with Dynasty Warriors 5. One last thing that other people seem to have liked, but I personally didn't, is the weight of weapons. You can now have normal, light, or heavy weapons when you find them. Normal is your standard weapon and would be exactly what you're used to. Light is a faster attack at the cost of a lower damage, and heavy should obviously be slower attacks with more damage. I mostly dislike this because I just want the normal weight. I would prefer a faster attack, but when you play a stage with a heavy weapon, it feels like the combat just crawls. A couple of times I could swear I was experiencing slowdown, but it was just the weight of my weapon. And still, bow combat sucks. Pro! With the Extreme Legends expansion, Legend Mode made a return. It's been slightly improved on. Instead of being smaller, minor, character-specific challenges, we now have full new scenarios and stages that are meant for different specified characters. Though we don't get as many new stages as Dynasty Warriors 4 Extreme Legends, we do get full stages. That's all I wanted. Extreme Mode was also brought back, still just as fun, if not more. This is a welcome challenge among the more easier gameplay than previous titles. But wait, there's even more! Besides Legend Mode and Extreme Mode, a new adventure called Destiny Mode is added. This is where the custom characters come into play. This is essentially the custom character story mode. You start off with little to your characters. Seriously, you only have 2 attacks. You can instantly buy up to your 4th, or just your 3rd with your charge attack. You are given a choice of officers from Wei, Wu, and Shu. You will be working under this officer throughout the duration of this mode. Well, not throughout the entire thing, because you may get a letter from another officer asking for you to betray your current general. You can unlock costume parts for your created characters through this. You also obtain a wide variety of weapons, which could end up the weapon your character uses when it's made a fully playable character outside of Destiny Mode. I ended up playing this a lot when I got Extreme Legends. It's a delightful experience and I still love to play it. Con! Probably one of the weirdest things to be removed from this entry that I need to make its own con for is the 5th weapons. Yes, in Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends and Dynasty Warriors 4 Extreme Legends, a 5th weapon was added. This was a weapon you'd get by playing a specific stage on the absolute hardest difficulty while completing very specific tasks. I don't understand why this was removed. They wouldn't have had to change the weapon models. You just have to create 6 new models for the new characters. It's absolutely mind-boggling why this was left out in this entry. You wouldn't have had to think too hard about the tasks to do. Just have them unlocked similarly by the characters who shared Legend Mode stages. Personally, I see this as a lazy act. The 4th weapons are still in there and they're all the same models as Dynasty Warriors 4. All the weapons are. That's what I don't get. Hell, if you really wanted to, you wouldn't have had to figure out new scenarios to unlock them. Make them the exact same as the 4th weapon, but on a harder difficulty. Seriously, this should not have been left out. I'm gonna be flat out honest here. I don't know why, but I just didn't enjoy this one as much as Dynasty Warriors 3 and 4. I feel like most of the changes were either the wrong ones, or they were a step backwards. Not including the 5th weapons is an incredible setback and almost makes the Extreme Legends expansion nearly worthless. If it wasn't for Destiny Mode and Extreme Mode, I would say to stay away from it. You get just as much enjoyment out of this game with or without the expansion. The fact that Empires was released on the 360 was amazing. I played so much of it. I actually noticed that I was missing achievements and ended up playing to get them all. Except, I'm still missing one. Goddamn 250th new officer that I can't seem to hire. Because I played this so much, I feel like it's criminal that the Western audience missed out on the vanilla version being released on the 360. I would have played this to perfection and probably wouldn't have had much to save for the cons. To be honest, if the 360 vanilla version got a release in North America, I would have rated this around the same as Dynasty Warriors 3 and 4. That being said, it's not that bad. I just feel like this game didn't have as much passion put into it as the previous games. That's why my final rating for this game is 7 out of 10. The little things add up and take away from the pros that I mentioned. This is the title that I can agree with other people that there's just not enough of a difference to make it worth it. If you already have Dynasty Warriors 3 or 4, I recommend you just stick with them. You're not missing out on a whole lot with this one. If you have the choice between Dynasty Warriors 3, 4, or 5, I'll always recommend 4 above the others. However, if you've never played a Dynasty Warriors game before and you see this entry for cheap, it's really not that bad. Comparatively, it just seems like a lazy entry as it looks the same, it feels the same. There's just too much of the same with this entry. But hopefully the next game in the series will make up for it. Dynasty Warriors has long been criticized for its gameplay and lack of differing styles between each release. Especially in the West, it's been reviewed at times without even being played, citing the same issues and rarely talking about the fun, mindless gameplay and the complicated secret weapons. On top of that, none of the reviews talk about the extremely fun two-player experience. With the heavy criticism, Koei went into their next release with a fresh mindset, redesigning the game's overall combat system, character design, and other major updates. When finally released to the public, the reviews were so mixed, all major home appliance producers thought about updating their patent. This became the most divisive release in the entire series. Fans either hated it or couldn't care about it. Critics either disliked it as much as past titles, or they praised Koei for trying something different even though they still didn't like it. But that being said, this is the start of what I call the new wave of Warriors games. So how is this for the beginning of a new age? Well, let's find out with the first Pro. Well, would you look at this? Now this is an improvement. A major criticism that I had for Dynasty Warriors 5 is that it looked too similar to its predecessor. Dynasty Warriors 6 breathes some new life into the visuals. Cutscenes look much more vibrant than before. You can tell this is not running on the same engine as the last entry. Maps are much larger than before, and are a joy to run around and explore. It can take a while to get through some stages as large as they are. It can be exciting to jump on a horse or go by foot to see how long it takes you to reach the other side of the map. The environments are textured better and have much more care put into them. It also feels like there's much more to do in the stages. Even the PS2 version looks better. This is such a breath of fresh air after Dynasty Warriors 5. I know that graphics aren't everything, but when your new game looks exactly like your old one, there's a bit of a problem. It never stopped me from playing Dynasty Warriors 5, but it did bug me. This new look helps to identify it as a new title. The previous one felt like more of the same thing, while this entry has a more individual look to it, especially when you compare it to previous games. Armor shines, water reflects light, everything adds up for a greater visual experience than any other entry before. Con! There is so much wrong with this game that it needs a con in itself. So here goes nothing. The combat in this game is absolutely repetitive. If you thought previous games were just pressing square to win, you haven't met this monstrosity. Square and triangle are their own combos of light and heavy attacks respectively. Heavy attacks are the only thing that can break someone's guards, which enemies can now guard from all directions. This is really annoying. The new system is called Renbu. You slowly increase the length of your combo through the stage by attacking enemies and building it up. There are 4 stages to the Renbu system. No matter what stage you are in, the light attack combo will loop as long as you continue to press the square button. Musou has been replaced by repeating 3rd stage Renbu with a final attack. This is just a repetitive mess. Weapons have been changed as well. You still find them randomly, but there's no 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th weapons. There are just 3 different types of weapons: standard, strength, and skill. These are your normal, heavy, and light weapons respectively. The looks do change for each weapon though, so it's not that terrible. But wait, there's no secret weapons? Are you fucking kidding me? There's an achievement for this game to beat every stage on the hardest difficulty, and you're telling me that there's no incentive to do that? Oh, and by the way, the weapons only change the looks for certain characters, not others. Let's not also forget that there are several characters missing. Not only that, there are no new characters either, so we just get less. Also, previous costumes don't make a return like before, just color swaps. Speaking of swapping, you remember way back to when characters were clones of each other, right? Yeah, back in Dynasty Warriors 2. That was almost 8 years before this game, and we solved that issue in Dynasty Warriors 3 by differentiating some movesets. Okay, well, how about we take another step back by making everyone who doesn't have a story mode a clone of each other? Let's only give them 6 differing movesets. Maybe make some of them clones of the characters from the story. That sounds like a good idea. Oh, did you hear that thing that I just brushed over? Well, I'm going to mention it. Yes, only a select few characters actually get a story in this. 4 from each dynasty, plus their respective leaders, as well as Lu Bu and Diao Chan. To go from 48 characters to 41, make most of them clones of each other, and then only give us 17 characters for story mode? Fuck you, game. Oh, and custom characters are only in Empires. Pro. I do have to say that I really like the character redesigns. I feel like the characters are more fleshed out now. Each character has more personality than before. You can take one look at them and know just how they're going to act. Their voices also suit them, and the acting has improved as well. Plus now they're starting to pronounce names correctly. He's no longer Cao Cao. They've also decided to give Sima Yi a more complete ending by adding the beginning of the Jin dynasty to his story. Horses are much better improved. They now have levels, and sometimes, though it's rare, they'll evolve into red hair. Hey, that rhymed. Also, you can call your horse from anywhere on the map, which is incredibly useful if you need to do something on the other side of the map. Horse combat is so improved that it is actually useful. Up to this entry, I only attacked while on a horse if I was trying to get somewhere and there were troops in the way. Now, if I wanted to, I can just hold guard and swing my weapon, and I can actually kill some people. You can now dodge as well. This can come in handy if you're surrounded. Also, no bow combat. Finally! I told you I'd continue to mention this until it was completely gone. And it is. Also, look at this! Finally! As well, you can move the camera with the right stick. I don't know why this wasn't a thing before. Many other games had a controlled camera, but at least it was added. Also, you can do a running charge attack now. Each character has a special ability that can be activated when you pick up a token. These can be skills that max out your Renbu for a short period of time, to boulders falling, to a quick burst of speed so that you can run around and mow down enemies. This also gains you more experience, giving you a little bit more to do when you're surrounded. God! I feel like the Empire's release is a step backwards in what was accomplished in Dynasty Warriors 5 Empires. We were able to keep our levels and there was a larger element of strategy in the entire package. You could choose from a list of policies that were already suggested to you and acted out. On top of that, when you invaded an enemy area where the ruler resided, you would take over the entire kingdom. You could turn this on and off among other customization choices for Empire mode. You don't get that with this game. No matter where you attack, you only take over that one area. Combat is much more simplistic thanks to the Renbu system. You upgrade weapons by the officer rather than the weapon type, though you do get to carry over your weapons and your horses when you start a new Empires mode. The other thing is you can choose to start as a wandering officer doing mercenary work for the highest bidder, then work your way up from there, getting noticed by a ruler and hired as a general, even going as far as to let you attempt to overthrow the ruler and conquer China. This is a great idea, but it's so poorly executed. Mercenary missions are short and boring. You barely get any decisions as a general, and all this does to the game is artificially extend the time it takes to clear a scenario. I would only pick up the Empire's title if you're looking for some easy gamer score or a platinum trophy. That's why you've been seeing some Japanese footage here. Because the game is so easy and simplistic, you don't even need to use the stratagems or understand what they do to be able to get the platinum trophy. I have all the achievements on the 360 as I had that console first. After I got Dynasty Warriors 6 Empires for the PS3, I went to platinum it in about 2 to 3 weeks. When you release a strategy heavy game and you don't need to understand what's going on to win, you know you messed up somewhere. Pro! This entry added several RPG elements to the mix. First of all, you no longer pick up stat boosts, you level up. This gives more incentive to kill enemy troops. Before, the only thing your level or rank did was either unlock costumes or allow you to ride faster horses. Different color palettes are still unlockable at level 25, but leveling up also increases your stats. Leveling up isn't the only way to increase your stats. Each time you gain a level, you're given a skill point which can be used to buy skills from each character's skill tree. These skill trees also have, well, skills. These can range from giving you extra attack or defense when you're low on health, to improving the effectiveness of health items. We've seen these kind of skills before in equipable items, but now they are character specific. I feel like these trees further develop the character's personality. You also have 3 objectives in every stage. These objectives give you a good chunk of experience points. Some of them can be challenging, others are fairly easy. Some have time limits and force you to work fast, while others will actually force you to pursue Lu Bu. All in all, the RPG elements that have been added in give the game new life, and makes the grinding a little bit more complex than just picking up random swords and shields to increase your attack and defense. God! There is no Extreme Legends expansion for this game. Nothing to undo the lack of story mode characters, the missing characters from the previous games, not to mention the clones. An Extreme Legends expansion would have been able to solve most of my issues with this game save for the combat. But if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have had the biggest fault of all. I briefly mentioned the PS2 version in the first Pro, praising its graphics. I personally think it looks more like a classic Dynasty Warriors game than the 360 or PS3 versions. The HD releases seem to have a slight motion blur to them. The PS2 is more crisp, but this is a con. Not only that it's the last con of this review, but this is the final nail in the coffin of this game. The PS2 version has more content than the 360 or PS3. Let that sink in for a second. The PS2 version not only gets 5 new stages, but it also gives Cao Pi, Zhang He, Taishi Ci, Ling Tong, Ma Chao, and Yue Ying their own weapons. You know what that means too, right? They each get their own story mode. This was a game for the people who didn't upgrade to the new hardware, as they not only get to experience a game that was supposed to be the new generation exclusive, but to have more content than the HD fuckers. On top of that, there was a release on the PSP. Unlike the last 2 Dynasty Warriors titles, this was a full port of the game. Even this version includes the new characters and story, cutting an even deeper wound for the PS3 and 360 users. And now I'm gonna throw salt on these wounds. It was never localized in North America or Europe. You had the translations already done. You would just have to do some programming to include the English text and audio from the console versions. But seriously, are you kidding me? There's no way you could have released Dynasty Warriors 6 Extreme Legends and have some of these new features on the PS3 and 360? It's not like you couldn't figure it out at the time, because Samurai Warriors 2 Extreme Legends was released as DLC for the 360 earlier that year. Just release it as the Dynasty Warriors 6 special upgrade. Not releasing the content to the HD platforms is the icing on the cake for this entry in the Dynasty Warriors series. Well then, this This is not what Warriors fans were expecting when Koei said they were going back to the drawing board to reinvent the series. Fans wanted something more. After Dynasty Warriors 5, which was a bit too similar to Dynasty Warriors 4, I was expecting an extravagant entry into the franchise. What we got was actually less. Less of everything. Less weapons, less story, less characters, and worst of all, less fun. Even when it came out, I didn't like Dynasty Warriors 6 as much as the previous entries. I'd constantly go back to the last 3 entries as they had more to offer. Plus, I was never actually done completing them. Warriors games take an iron will to complete. Dynasty Warriors 6 isn't very different. To get everyone up to level 50, then to finish every stage on the hardest difficulty to get those last 2 achievements is a trial. But does anybody want to do that? And don't even get me started on Empires. It's more simplistic and way too easy to get the platinum. That's why Dynasty Warriors 6 gets a 5 out of 10. I've always been disappointed in Dynasty Warriors 6. It was supposed to be the phoenix of the series, rising it up to critical acclaim after being thrown away as the same old thing with each release. This was not the change we wanted, nor was it the change we needed. This game was criticized harshly by fans and got pretty much the same reviews from top critics. Something had to change. Dynasty Warriors was on the verge of being let go by its fans. After fans and critics finally agreed that Dynasty Warriors 6 wasn't quite up to par, Koei went back to the drawing board yet again. They decided they needed to go back to basics. Everything that was being said about the last release was being considered. They completely revamped the entire system and brought back a lot of the previous gameplay mechanics as well as expanding on them. Koei took this seriously and wanted to give Dynasty Warriors a true breath of fresh air. Not only did they want to increase the scope of the gameplay, they wanted a more incredible story. This game brought in new players. This was the start of Dynasty Warriors' entrance into bigger fame and higher critical score. Though the critics still disliked the game and probably didn't even play it, the fans loved this entry into the series and revitalized the idea of the franchise. But where does this take us? Well, here comes the first Pro. We are back, baby! Back to the beautiful combo system of yore. The 4 to 6 attack combos are back with a vengeance. They feel more creative and personal to each weapon. Characters also have EX attacks that give an extension to their usual combos. These are usually more stylish and you'll find them very effective. This actually feels like it should have been Dynasty Warriors 6, and the last entry was a game made by a completely different company. I feel like I'm back to playing Dynasty Warriors 3 and 4 again. Musous are no longer a string of your normal attack, but they're no longer a long string of attacks at all. They are more like special attacks, kind of like going from a Tekken 10 hit combo to a Street Fighter Hadouken. To be honest, I much prefer this. I used to find that the old Musou attacks would sometimes be blocked by my enemy's Musou attacks, and we'd find ourselves in a deadlock, which is really annoying when you're low on health and you just want to rid yourself of the enemy so you can run away and grab a meat bun. So yes, I love the new combat system, or, well, the old combat. Anyways, it's good. God! One of the funnest things about playing Dynasty Warriors games is going back and playing through stages with characters who wouldn't have been in the stage while playing story. This would usually be done through free mode. When I've completed story mode however many times I need to unlock everything from it, I'd usually go straight to free mode for the rest of my grinding. I'd play through random stages with random characters to get them strong enough to unlock the secret weapons. In Dynasty Warriors 7, you no longer have free mode. You can only replay story missions with the characters that are from those stages. In fact, you can't even play 2-player in story mode. What we now have is called Conquest mode, and it is shit. Let me explain. Most stages in Conquest mode feel majorly incomplete or empty. There might only be a couple of officers and some troops. I do want to clarify that you can play character-specific stages that are almost a continuation of the story mode, but they don't have the same feeling as the story mode. They just feel like emotionless stages. They have no build-up like most of the story stages. And probably the worst thing about Conquest mode is that the secret weapons are in there. If you can even call them secret weapons. You can unlock everything in this game, get every trophy or achievement, and max out all of your character's stats by playing on the easiest difficulty. The secret weapons are just in a stage where you have to kill the famous officer at the end. That's it. There's no challenge in this game, and thanks to Conquest mode, there's no real reason to replay this game. Pro. Hey, another time where I have to mention multiple improvements as a single pro. These are all minor things, but added together create enough information for just one pro. Now, where do I start? How about where most people would start with this game? The story mode. Though I previously mentioned the lack of free mode as well as the conquest mode as a con, the story mode in this game is the best to date. Thanks to cutscenes and fluid, seamless connection between the cutscenes and actual gameplay, we are treated to the most grounded Warriors experience. You begin to understand each character even more thanks to their development. Though the stages are character specific, you feel like you're learning more about that character by playing as them. Each dynasty has their own story again, similar to Dynasty Warriors 4, but moreover, it feels like you're actually playing playing out the story of that kingdom. In all other games, it felt like you were just selecting your favorite character and jumping into stages. That was it. Nothing more, nothing less. It was bare bones and basic, but it was fun. In Dynasty Warriors 7, you pick a loyalty. You pick your family and you go through the story until the bitter end. You become one with the characters, and God forbid one of the important ones dies in the story because you actually feel it this time. Before, emotion was just wasn't a thing in Dynasty Warriors games. Now it's abundant, and quite honestly, it feels great. Now, this story isn't the only thing that helps this game out in the minor improvements department. I mentioned previously the EX attacks were a thing. Well, they are, but only with the weapons that your character is specified to. That's right, you can switch weapons. This was introduced in Dynasty Warriors Strike Force, a game I might touch on sometime. But the thing they did was give every weapon a specific moveset. In Strike Force, you'd pick a weapon and the moveset might be different from one character to another. But now you can take Lubu's Sky Piercer into battle no matter who you're playing as. Each character has a star ranking next to each weapon. This shows you which weapons a character might be more proficient with. At the highest rank, you gain access to special abilities and attacks do much more damage. But at the lowest rank, your character moves a little bit more slower and deals less damage. Lastly, I'd like to touch on the DLC. Usually I might not talk about downloadable content as it's extra stuff that doesn't necessarily come in the package. You have to pay extra to be able to get it. You don't need to buy it, but you should. Koei Tecmo has given us the most nostalgic trip down memory lane. They slowly added costumes from each previous game back to Dynasty Warriors 3. I imagine Dynasty Warriors 2 wasn't included because the costumes between 2 and 3 are extremely close to each other. That being said, they didn't forget about Dynasty Warriors 2. They also released new stages. Well, old stages, that is. All the stages from Dynasty Warriors 2 are available as DLC and come with the original officer layout, as well as additional scenarios new to Dynasty Warriors 7. This is awesome, especially to run into one of those old stages with the old costumes. That's some good shit. There's also new weapons and costumes never seen before. These actually include modern costumes that look, honestly, really out of place. And that's awesome. God! Now then, I want to touch on the fact that since some weapons are switchable, since some characters use the same weapons as other characters, we still have clones. After the disaster that was Dynasty Warriors 6, we still have clones! As much fun as it is to see every character run around with every single weapon, you'll probably only end up using the weapons that you like, just because it's easier, especially with Extreme Legends. You're able to upgrade each character's capabilities with different weapons, allowing each character to master each weapon. In the end, why would you use the weapons you dislike? Still on the topic of Extreme Legends, trying to obtain all those special weapons in that game actually involve playing stages on harder difficulties doing specific things, just like the classic games, which would be a pro on its own, but it's bundled with the fact that it's easier with Lubu's weapon. When you have 2 halberds equipped to a character, every time you switch to your other weapon, your movement speed increases greatly for a short period of time, meaning you could switch back and forth for the extra boost. Switch just as you feel your character slowing down and you'll be given a speed boost yet again. You won't even need a horse because it increases your running speed as well. I don't mind switchable weapons. I actually really enjoy it. I didn't play much of Dynasty Warriors Strike Force, but when I did play it, I enjoyed switching between the weapons. The whole roster of characters don't have that individuality in their movesets anymore. Pro! The Empire's title for Dynasty Warriors 7 has been expanded upon so much. You actually feel like you're playing out the story of your character. There are a lot of improvements that build off what Dynasty Warriors 6 Empires added to the formula and fixes most of the issues that it had. First of all, I have to say that I really enjoy that you can change the character speech bubbles to be based off of the models rather than the rendered expressions. This is really cool to play through the game with everyone having their old costumes. Seeing characters wear the outfits they had in Dynasty Warriors 4 brings back a lot of nostalgia. This entry also adds a lot of new features that previous Empires games did not have. First off, the strategy cards add a lot of, well, strategy. You can activate these events at any time. They can be a flood if the battlefield allows for it, changing what kind of base an allied base is, or even summoning allied units to your location. They've also added a new character. To drive the fact that this expansion is much more tactical, they've added a new strategist to the roster. Welcome Shu Shu to the party. Shu 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 Shoo shoo, shoo shoo shoo, shoo, shoo. This is really cool because they ran a poll to decide this character, so this is really for the fans. Then there's the fact that you can play as any type of officer from a wandering mercenary to a ruler. I know you could do this in Dynasty Warriors 6, but it's done much more competently here. I feel like this is a viable way to play the game now, whereas the way it was done before, it just felt like a tacked on mechanic. What you do also feels like it impacts your gameplay more. If you focus on developing weapons, you'll have better weapons, but that also means you might miss out on donating or taxing the people of your land. You might miss out on interacting with your officers to increase your bond with them. There are so many things you can do in Empire's release that what I've played feels so insignificant. God! I'm gonna mention a couple of things that were taken away or dumbed down in Dynasty Warriors 7. These are little things that were in previous games, but for some reason they were just taken out. First off, duels. They were introduced in Dynasty Warriors 4, taken away in 5, re-implemented in 6. Though I didn't really like the way it was done in 6 compared to Dynasty Warriors 4, I still enjoyed when I saw troops form a circle every time I was like, oh shit! Then there's the controls. I praised it previously on how it went back to the classic Dynasty Warriors style of attacks, but I didn't feel like the few things they took away were necessary to omit. Like jumping charge attacks. They're just gone. We've had those since Dynasty Warriors 4, and they're no longer available to us. Running charge attacks were welcoming in 6, but no longer exist in 7. We can't dodge anymore. That last one wasn't really important to playing this game, but could have been used when you find yourself surrounded. I also want to say how disappointed I am in the lack of ending animations. There are many beautifully rendered events throughout the story, but there are none of those artistic ending animations from previous titles. I understand why they're not in the story. The seamless cutscenes of the story wouldn't mesh very well with the ending animations, but in Conquest mode and pretty well everything else, I feel like they should have been added in. Also, since I mentioned it for the last couple of games, I might as well mention it here. Dynasty Warriors 7 also had a PSP release. Again, this was not localized in either North America or Europe. This can have the same argument as Dynasty Warriors 6. You could have included the English text and audio from the console releases. Even if you didn't include the DLC, I still would have bought this game and played the hell out of it. Lastly, even though I mentioned all of Empires as a pro, there was one thing that pissed me off about it. I only just played the Empire's release for this review. Now you might be wondering why, seeing as how I praised it much better than any other Empire's release so far. Well, that's because here in North America we didn't get a physical copy of it. I had to import it from Europe, also eliminating the North American DLC I had. Luckily it came with Dynasty Warriors 4, 5, and 6 costumes, but still, this was due to a weird rule that Sony of America had where they didn't want any physical releases with Japanese dubbed games. I never understood it, and this wasn't the only game that North America missed out due to that weird rule. In the end, Dynasty Warriors 7 feels like a love letter to the rest of the franchise, establishing new character designs, weapons, and battle mechanics, but also showing us that Koei still thinks about the good old days. The story is so well executed that even if you're not a Warriors fan, you should still enjoy playing through this mode. Sadly, the absence of two-player co-op in the story mode and the lack of free mode makes this game feel like it needs more. Even with the Extreme Legends expansion, I felt like there wasn't enough modes and levels to keep me from getting bored when it came time to grind out the titles and people's stats. The fact that in North America we didn't get a physical copy of the Empires or a release on the PSP overseas at all is very disappointing. So with all that in mind, I give Dynasty Warriors 7 as well as all of its expansions 8.5 out of 10. This goes right back to being one of the better Dynasty Warriors releases. Never did I feel like playing a previous title instead of this one. This reestablishes the franchise as one of my favorite of all time, and I can't help but look forward to the next one. After having success with Dynasty Warriors 7, Koei wanted to continue the growth of this series. By expanding more on the story and the game's mechanics, Koei tried to give more spirit to Dynasty Warriors. On top of the small story and gameplay upgrades, there were more modes to play and replayability was exponentially increased. With that being said, some fans and critics were let down with the lack of upgrade as compared from Dynasty Warriors 6 to Dynasty Warriors 7. But how was the latest release? Well, funny you ask, because here's the first pro. I've mentioned either the gameplay or the story as the first pro for most of these reviews, and I'm going to continue that trend because the story mode in this game I feel fixes the few issues that I have with Dynasty Warriors 7's story, mainly that it didn't have a two-player option. You get to select from a few characters who are integral to the specific stage you're playing. When playing two-player, the second player also chooses from these characters. I find this is a great idea. Rather than letting player 2 pick from any character, it gives them more importance to the story stages. Free mode is back and better than ever. Most stages you can play on either side, which has always been fun. You don't have to stick to the force that the story stage was originally for. You also get 3 challenges with each stage. On top of that, you rank based on your time cleared, KOs, and other stats for a final rating. All this on top of even more DLC stages from Dynasty Warriors 4 and 5. You'll get a lot of play out of this one. Even with story and free mode, you also get ambition mode. In this mode, you play smaller stages and try to build your village up and make it something great. I complained about Dynasty Warriors 7's Conquest mode being a terrible replacement for free mode, but ambition mode does it right. There are 4 types of stages you can pick from that will help you get fame, gold, materials, or allies. So this gives you more incentive to play through these similar stages, plus you still have free mode if you get bored of the smaller stages. Just like when we got Dynasty Warriors 5 after 4, Dynasty Warriors 8 looks very similar to Dynasty Warriors 7, which is sad to say because both Dynasty Warriors 6 and 7 updated the visuals quite a bit. There are minor improvements, but it looks like it's still running on the exact same engine. I was personally expecting a lot more out of this game visually. I wanted another good buff in the graphics department. I wanted to see them push the PS3 to the edge of its capabilities. Some characters even seem to have very similar looking costumes to Dynasty Warriors 7. I know you don't want to completely change the character design, but to me it looks like Wang Yi's costume is just an updated version of the DLC costume from Dynasty Warriors 7. Also, Shu Shu's costume hasn't changed from Dynasty Warriors 7 Empires, we just get a hooded version of it. Again, like with Dynasty Warriors 7, when you dress up your characters with the costumes from previous games, you start to see just how similar the games look. I did some research to find out that it's actually running on a different engine, which is supposed to use better lighting effects and make it look more realistic. Honestly, I can see it, but the models look the same. Now, even though I said I couldn't really see a difference in the graphical engines between Dynasty Warriors 7 and Dynasty Warriors 8, this game was also released on Vita and PS4, and here are the PS4 improvements. You can tell the character models are much more smooth. Everything reflects light as it should, meaning the engine that was built for this game really works well on the PS4. On top of that, I actually didn't carry over my save from PS3 to PS4 because I really wanted to experience the story all over again. It didn't help when I wanted to platinum this game, but we all make mistakes. As I mentioned, this game was released on Vita as well. This is a full port of the Extreme Legends Complete Edition from PS4, meaning you can take this entire game on the go. Not only that, but the Extreme Legends games are cross-save between PS3, PS4, and Vita, so you can also take your save file anywhere you need to be. I've been utilizing this a lot to get the Platinum Trophy. Also, for some reason, the PS4 trophies are separate from the PS3 and Vita trophies, meaning you get 2 Platinums. The PS4 and Vita releases are a combined package of the vanilla game with the Extreme Legends. The Extreme Legends expansion adds a hell of a lot to do. Similarly to Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends, they've added another faction to the story. This time, it's Lu Bu. That's right, the entire story is dedicated to Lu Bu. This story lasts just as long as the previous ones and covers Lu Bu's life from his initial adoption to his death at Xiapi. There are also what-if stories that show him taking on armies he's never battled before. The 3 main dynasties get a new character while Lu Bu's faction gains 2. Chen Gong, Lu Bu's strategist, makes an appearance. Lu Lingqi, who is a fictional name for an actual historical daughter of Lu Bu. Yeah, that's confusing. Along with the additions to the story mode, you also get an expansion on ambition mode. You are now taking the allies you've gained through this mode into bigger battles to take over the rest of China. This is almost a dumbed down version of Empires mode, and it's kind of cool for that. Instead of taking out rulers and claiming other armies' lands, instead you have subjugation. As you complete battles in different regions, you'll earn a subjugation percentage. Once the percentage reaches 100%, you have control over that region. All in all, the Extreme Legends expansions are really good here.
God! Oh God, help me!
I've said it before that I'm trying to get the Platinum Trophy, and that I'm bouncing back and forth between the PS4 version and the Vita version to get this trophy. Well, there's a reason. This game is a completionist nightmare! First of all, with the Extreme Legends expansion, the level cap is raised to 150. Plus, each character has a leadership level for their bodyguards in free mode and ambition mode. Then I have to mention the secret weapons are back. Though this is exciting for me, it's another thing to add to the list of platinum requirements. Then the game expects you to complete every stage on the hardest difficulty. You also have to get an A ranking and complete the various extra tasks for each stage. This doesn't have to be done on any specific difficulty, but it's still really hard. Though it's refreshing to see the newest entry have so much going for it, I almost feel it's too much. It's too overwhelming. I get anxiety thinking about how many more stages I need to go through. How many more challenges do I need to complete? How long is it going to take to unlock one more trophy? Not gonna lie, I kinda like it. Only kinda. So I mentioned that secret weapons have made a comeback, but that's not the only change to weapons that's a good thing. First of all, every single character has been given their own independent weapon. That's right, no character has the same EX weapon like in Dynasty Warriors 7. We still have all the same weapons as previous entries. Some characters have been given the DLC weapons from Dynasty Warriors 7, while others have completely new weapons. Along with every character having their own EX weapon, we now have 2 EX attacks. This helps to incentivize you to keep the EX weapon equipped. You also have 3 different Musou attacks rather than just the 2. But most of all, the thing that I I love about the new weapon system is the rock, paper, scissors aspect to it. Each weapon now has an affinity, either earth, man, or heaven. If you want, you can equip 2 weapons of the same affinity, but you'll be at a slight disadvantage. When you're running around the battlefield, you might see an enemy officer with a diamond-like icon above their head. This means that your affinity beats theirs. If you attack them for a long enough time and whittle down that icon, you'll perform a rush attack. If you don't see any icon, that means you're using the same affinity as that officer, and you don't get anything special from it. If you see a big exclamation point above their head, that means their affinity beats yours. If you attack them, you will not stagger them. They can attack through you and make you stagger. But if they perform a charge attack, they'll slow down for a bit and you'll be able to switch your weapon and gain a big boost to your stats for a short period of time. All of this makes it even better to switch between weapons as you play through this game.
Con!
Just like every other Dynasty Warriors update, there are a few things that come with it that I just don't like. Let's start off with Empires. There's nothing inherently wrong with this entry. It's a solid game and has a lot to do in it, but 7 Empires was just better. I find this new Empires is a little more hollow. While Dynasty Warriors 7 Empires was filled to the brim with little things that make it feel like you're actually playing through the character's story, in 8 Empires, some of those little things are now lost. I loved going to town and buying clothes for custom characters, weapons and horses and so on. Now all this is done through menus. I also don't feel like there's as much interaction between you and your officers or peers. In 7 I found my characters would talk to each other or events would trigger more often than with 8. That being said, 8 is more of the same thing. Creating characters is still lots of fun. Playing through a game with these custom characters can be really interesting. You have more customization options, but I would still rather 7 Empires. There is something really good about Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires, and that's if you want to play the game and give it a try. There is a free-to-play version of this game on PS4 and Vita. I haven't played this, but I'd recommend it as a demo for the game if you'd like to try it. Another thing that bothered me was the DLC. Some of it was incredibly awesome. The older costumes from the previous games were lower priced than they were in Dynasty Warriors 7. That being said, I would have liked it if they gave it to the people who already owned it for 7. But whatever. I'll still pay for the extra costumes. The quote-unquote original costumes from Dynasty Warriors 7, however, are back to their usual prices. Also, there's only one real original costume set that's exclusive for Dynasty Warriors 8. The DLC stages are back, with some stages from Dynasty Warriors 4, 5, and 5 Extreme Legends, but not like with the Dynasty Warriors 2 stages from the previous entry. In 7, we got all the stages from Dynasty Warriors 2. I know it would have been a tall order for all the stages from Dynasty Warriors 4, but that would have been much nicer to maybe have the bigger stages that people experience than the odd one we actually get. Then there's the odd thing that really annoys me, like the fact that the horses turn really weird in the PS4 version. We also get the flowing cutscenes from the story in Dynasty Warriors 7, but they feel a little bit more janky, because even though you get to pick a character to play through these stages, you can obviously tell they want you to play as a specific character. When the camera pans behind the characters and switches back to the gameplay, the camera can kind of snap a bit and break the flow. I kind of would have rathered the old cutscenes that don't transition into the gameplay. Well, it's been a ride. Going through every Dynasty Warriors game from 2 to 8, it's been an adventure. Before I move on to give Dynasty Warriors 8 a final rating, I just wanted to say that I love all of these games. Even though 2 was a little boring for a while, it was still cool to experience the game again. Since I've been doing this retrospective look at the series, I'll remind you all of the scores so far. I found Dynasty Warriors 2 just didn't have much to do after you complete a couple of stories. There's a lot of grinding to just max out the people's stats, and there's not much to complete past that. Even though the groundwork was placed for future games, Dynasty Warriors 2 got a 4 out of 10. Dynasty Warriors 3 was the beginning of my love for this series. I found that all the additional collectibles and extra bits gave the game much more replayability. On top of all that, we got 2-player co-op. The Extreme Legends expansions gave us so much to do. Thanks to all those additions, Dynasty Warriors 3 got an 8 out of 10. Dynasty Warriors 4 solidified the groundwork that Dynasty Warriors 2 had placed, giving the characters more life by casting real voice actors and pushing the story even further by making it more about the factions rather than giving each character some stages from history. Though the Extreme Legends and Empires releases for this title didn't hit the mark that I wanted, I still love this entry. Dynasty Warriors 4 is my favorite of the classic Warriors era, and that's why I gave it 8.5 out of 10. Dynasty Warriors 5 was a mixed bag for me. Though it was fun and the Extreme Legends and Empires expansions added the most I've found so far in the series, I felt like it was just more of the same stuff. The graphics, though they looked a bit better, looked almost exactly the same to Dynasty Warriors 4. The lack of a 360 release of the vanilla game disappointed me so much. Even though this was still fun, I scored it lower based on the lack of innovation, so Dynasty Warriors 5 got a 7 out of 10. Dynasty Warriors 6 was Koei's attempt to listen to the critics. After being told their games were all the same repetitive gameplay over and over again, they wanted to reinvigorate the franchise with new life. They redesigned many of the characters and revamped the entire combat system. They also released an expanded version of this title exclusively for PS2, which all fell pretty flat. I still don't mind playing this game, but it was just too boring for me to continue with. I would go back to play previous titles instead, even when this was new. That's why Dynasty Warriors 6 got a 5 out of 10. Dynasty Warriors 7 was the reimagining the fans really needed, giving us a much more expanded story and character development, being able to switch from the plethora of weapons, plus the Empire's title having so much more to offer the player, with various routes to travel and customization options that made your playthrough an individual journey. This release was the most fun I've had with Dynasty Warriors in a long time, probably since the release of Dynasty Warriors 4. That's why I gave it 8.5 out of 10. Finally, here we are, the latest entry in a series that doesn't seem to want to die, and I would be heartbroken if it did. Dynasty Warriors 8 is to 7 what 5 was to 4, more of the same. They did expand many things, giving characters more individuality by giving them their own weapons, everyone having 3 Musou attacks, and a second EX attack. Then we have the Extreme Legends expansion for the PS4 and Vita that gave us even more to do. The replayability for Dynasty Warriors 8 with the Extreme Legends expansion is something that most games can't even shake a stick at. If you plan to complete this game and have both a PS4 and a Vita, I'd highly recommend you getting both. You can transfer your save data back and forth between the two consoles, allowing you to pick up where you left off on the go. Though the Empire's release didn't quite hit the mark that 7 did, it was still enjoyable enough to recommend if you only have a PS4 and want to add more to your Dynasty Warriors 8, though I'd still recommend 7 above it as the best Empire's release. That being said, to end this week of Dynasty Warriors, I give Dynasty Warriors 8 along with Extreme Legends and Empires 9 out of 10. I honestly think this entry is the best Koei has to put out. Even though it was more of the same from Dynasty Warriors 7, I never felt compelled to go back and complete other games. 8 has a charm that keeps me coming back, and I know the last few trophies I need to claim to get the platinum for this trophy are going to take some iron will grinding to get, but I'm still going to enjoy coming back to this game to knock out a couple stages to get closer to that goal. In the end, I wanted to talk about the Dynasty Warriors franchise as a whole. As I said, I've been following this series since Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends. I've been buying up every release I can. So far, I haven't missed a single one. I've experienced every spin-off, and I've enjoyed my time with all of them. Thank you very much for coming along this journey with me. I hope you really enjoyed these videos. Please subscribe because I plan to make Musou May an annual event. I will continue to upload Koei Tecmo related videos throughout the year, but you can be guaranteed that every May there will be some extra stuff. Thanks again everyone, and I'll see you next month.